Hello and welcome to the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. I'm your host, Rosa Hart, and today I am joined by a Kentuckian outside of Kentucky, Aaron Edwards. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Rosa. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, we had a serendipitous meeting, sort of, I guess. My son was applying to go to the Gatton Academy at Western Kentucky University, and they passed out this magazine of their star people who had gone there before. And there was this big thing on Aaron Edwards and his amazing cancer research. And I was like, what? And so I was like, I got to find this guy on LinkedIn. So I did, and then you answered, which was awesome. And I'm just so excited to learn about the work that you are doing to cure cancer, literally. And the fact that you came from here is also amazing. Now, Aaron, you grew up in Henderson, Kentucky, right?
Sure did. Born and raised.
All right. And what do you think is the trajectory that set you towards healthcare?
Yeah. So I have a lot of, I would say, sort of healthcare adjacent, or definitely healthcare
Mhm.
members in my family for a long time. So my grandma on my dad's side of the family was a nurse. My grandpa was a family pharmacist. So that he had his
Oh,
own chain of pharmacies in town that my
wow.
dad then started to run before sort of the retail chain took over in the area. So
Mhm.
I definitely have early memories of being a kid behind, but when we were allowed to back in the day of being a kid running around behind the pharmacy counter. And even on my mom's side of the family, lots of science people that encouraged active curiosity and questions when I was a kid to think about how the world worked a little bit.
Yeah, and encouraging that curiosity is so important for innovative people with new ideas who aren't just content doing what they're told and are like, well, how can we make this better?
Yeah.
And one thing that stood out to me is you said you looked for Miss Frizzles in your life who
Yes.
made that adventure fun. And I loved that you brought that up because I grew up watching The Magic School Bus
Oh,
and
yes.
definitely was my favorite entryway into science. So, who were some of yours and what do you feel like they saw in you before you could see it in yourself?
Yeah, 100%. I think so. The trajectory of my family and my family encouraged sort of the early stages of curiosity, and when they couldn't answer, why the sky was blue, they then sort of directed me to teachers, and I was really fortunate from an early age, even in a small town, to have a lot of teachers that
Mhm.
I think saw potential in me before I did, and really just made learning fun. I can remember my kindergarten teacher, or the one of my kindergarten teachers ended up naming her baby after me, which I didn't know. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I was
Oh,
really close with some staff in my elementary school. So I remember my preschool teacher or my kindergarten teacher. I was really good friends with my librarian
oh,
in that school because she was a Star Trek fan. So so
yes.
so my mom and I
Awesome.
were Trekkies, and I would finish my assignments when I was growing up or when I was in school and always ask permission to go to the library for 10 minutes because it just felt like an escape in a good way. It just
Mhm.
was going into this sci-fi world. So she had posters all over the library. So Miss Watson, if you're out there listening, shout out to you too. Just a ton of them, and I think over time, uh, you every sort of stage, I always had these Miss Frizzles, guys, girls, whatever. And I think the two sort of more recent or influential ones were my high school chemistry teacher, so Miss Kara Becker. She was
Mhm.
like the penultimate, I think, Miss Frizzle in my life, where we would hang out before school. All the nerds would go to her
Oh,
classroom to just a safe space for the nerds to hang out.
right.
And when you make school fun, you want to learn more. And I don't think that you can't realize it at the time, the impact that can have, really setting you on a trajectory to continue to do that, hopefully in your career someday.
You're so right about that, and I love it when I hear my kids talk about enjoying school, and it's always really sad if it's a year where, things aren't jiving as much, But right now, my son's really enjoying learning Japanese.
Mm.
Um, and that is his favorite class in school. That's the teacher he wants to hang out with. And those classmates, they're all into it together. It's very niche. And so, yeah, it's amazing the things he will learn. Now, I don't know if that will be enough to get him to try Japanese food, 'cause he's
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
we will know he has crossed into a whole new realm if we get that far, but we're making progress.
Yeah,
So
these I think it really is special. Even if it's not something you do long term, I think just creating these spaces where learning is fun also just creates communities of friends. It doesn't have
right,
to be the sport. It is just
with
about
similar interests.
finding, yeah, yeah. And I think being able to kind of explore your interests is really important. Throughout your childhood, and in creating spaces for that is really influential.
Yeah. Do you find that Gatton Academy did that for you?
Oh, 100%. So, I was in the first class, so I wasn't there the full 2 years because we were the first
Oh,
graduating class.
oh, okay.
And so we were the senior my senior year was the only year at Gatton, and
Okay.
I remember, it was a big jump. I was, it was just not even a concept that we had ever considered before, of sort of these boarding type schools where you would leave, even though it wasn't that far from home.
And stay in
Uh,
a
you know,
dorm.
yeah, and staying in a dorm, and it was the first year of the program, so there was
Yeah.
just sort of a lot of risks to take, but it was a ton of fun and extremely important for just starting growth on an independent side of having to do things on your own when your parents aren't sort of giving the guardrails for you. It was a extremely impactful time in my life, and I still have a lot of friends from those days too.
Oh, good. My son made the waiting list, so we'll see if he gets in there. He did their summer camp, which went really well, and from the pictures that they shared, like, their smiles are huge, and I don't know if you know what they do in the summer, but they have, like, a 3-week camp where they take the kids' phones away, and they can call you
Oh,
for 5 minutes in the whole week for an update to let you know they're alive, and that's
yeah,
it, and but in the pictures, they were just smiling and laughing, and when he came back, he said he wanted to go back again. I was like, "You wanna forfeit your phone
yeah.
3
Yeah,
weeks ahead?"
that's awesome. That's awesome. I hadn't heard of that, but I think the sort of exercise of disconnecting and
Right?
and again, just enjoying how to socialize with people that might
Yeah.
like science, STEM, whatever it
Yeah,
is really cool to hear.
right, and I think a lot of the kids would talk about, and I don't know if this was your experience too, but maybe they felt like they were overachievers in their school and had to run everything, and then they come to, Gatton or Vampy, which is the summer camp,
Oh yeah,
and they can relax because they're surrounded by other really smart, competent, motivated people, so they can just, like, focus on their one thing and let other
yeah.
people.
Oh, so I didn't do Vampy. I did Scats though
Oh,
early.
that's
So it's the earlier. It's like a pre. It's a pre
younger.
Vampy.
Oh,
it's younger, like pre
okay.
Vampy. So it's not as intense. But yeah, I remember that, and a couple of my friends did that before going to the Gatton as well. And
Oh, I have to look
it's good
into
exposure
that.
too. It's just knowing that you can find other people that might have the same interests, because you're right. The in Henderson, it's a town of 20, 30,000, if I remember correctly, finding people that have that shared interest in school.
Mhm.
I was fortunate to have a group there and some teachers that sort of cultivated that.
Right,
It is a very new experience when everybody there has that
right?
shared
And
kind
then
of excitement.
it's also kind of like an identity crisis, isn't it? If you're like, "Oh, wait, it's not that I'm weird," like, all of a sudden
Yeah,
you're normal because you're surrounded by people like you,
yeah,
and then you
100%.
can just relax. Anyway, so I'm glad to hear that you had a great experience there too. Um, but I'd love to learn more about your work that you've been doing since you moved on and went on to grown up college for real. And so to segue into your cancer research for our listeners who aren't scientists, can you paint a picture of why the CAR T therapy works so well for blood cancers, but it keeps hitting a wall with solid tumors, and what your work with KiraGen is doing differently?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, This is a technology. Technologies take a long time to transition into clinical benefit. So people might be working at the bench, but actually translating that to a drug, it takes a long time. So there's sort of different generations where things keep improving. Just like in the tech space, science is very similar in iterating and improving. And we've been able to find, and this is commercialized on the market now. For someone with a blood-based cancers, such leukemias, you can take a patient's blood, just like a donation. You can remove these immune cells, your T cells, is a type of immune white blood cell, and you can essentially tell those cells to go target tumors again. And then those patients get that infusion. And for blood-based cancers, that there has led to transformative outcomes, curative, 10, 15-year now in remission outcomes. But that translation to solid tumors has been very lacking and almost, I would say, non-existent because they're apples and oranges.
Yeah, it's a
So
different delivery mechanism, right? It's just not in the
completely.
same flow.
Yeah, and like if you're taking a an IV based therapy, and you have a blood cancer, there's more likelihood that therapy is going to hit the tumor or the
Yeah.
circulating tumor, but also in a solid tumor, it's a really dense mass. It's a
Well,
solid tumor, and that solid tumor has evolved many, what I say, offenses and defenses to turn off not only your immune system, but also these immune cell based therapies.
oh
So,
my
so
goodness.
you spontaneously are getting cancer, like mini cancers, I would say, a lot, but your body knows how to sense those early to remove them, and
Are
you get
those
an
free radicals?
yeah, or you might get some DNA damage, the
Oh,
things that are abnormal. If a cell
mhm.
starts growing too much, there are things that your body knows to sense to remove that before they become a problem. And that happens all the time. It's normal. Your body is wild. And you get a tumor when the body cannot handle that for some reason. It may be mutated in a way your body couldn't handle. In a
Yeah.
solid tumor, you might get similar offenses and defenses in blood cancer, but now that it's this one space, it's dense. So you
Mm,
have a lot of it. So it's like a fortress that is trying to do anything it can to make sure your immune cells do not see this tumor.
mm.
And so for that type of therapy that has led to really transformative outcomes for leukemias and some other blood-based cancers, that therapy will get to the tumor site now and almost instantly turn off. It's
Mm.
just told no, stop
Wow.
working. And so for a lot of these spaces, there's just so many different problems to tackle that one over time we've been trying to find ways to expand access to more patients, but also find ways to make these therapies even better
Yeah.
than the sort of first generation to really make a dent in what is actually 90% of cancer deaths worldwide are actually from solid tumors now.
Right. And then I saw a mention of glioblastoma in the article about you, and that I think that's probably what jumped out at me the most because my former boss and mentor passed away really quickly of a
Sorry to hear
glioblastoma.
that.
And well, she had like built a whole stroke program and revolutionized stroke care in the state of Kentucky. And yet, here this tumor came out of nowhere and just took over her brain. And so I'm really excited anytime I see anything that might be helpful addressing that so that we can prevent losing anyone else to that horrible thing. And I know because it is so fast moving, that makes the research more challenging because you
Yeah.
don't have long to wait, like once you have it. So, since it is like that, what does a patient with glioblastoma face today, and what would a world with KiraGen's therapy actually look like for them?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking. So to give some context for the listeners,
Yeah.
glioblastoma is the most aggressive brain cancer. And once by the time that it's diagnosed, your median survival is 15 months. So the for a lot of other solid-based tumors, things like checkpoint inhibitors, Keytruda, which is a checkpoint inhibitor blockade, therapies like that have really made strides in lung cancers and others. But there's some of these really aggressive solid tumors, pancreatic, ovarian, breast still, and in the brain, where these therapies really have a hard time making traction. Or maybe you get a little bit of improvement and that tumor comes back. In the brain, there have been historical challenges. So getting something to the brain is difficult when you have this thing called the blood-brain barrier, which usually prevents a lot of therapies from getting there. Um, Glioblastoma in the brain, think about what I said earlier about a solid tumor being this dense mass. You
Mhm.
now have a dense mass in a protected area already in the brain.
Right.
And so it's extremely hard to get there. And glioblastoma is also known, it's just all of these things are compounding, making it harder to treat.
Yeah.
It's infiltrated. So they have, I'm trying to do a little visual diagram. It
Right.
literally reaches through. And so surgical resection is really challenging.
Yeah.
So even
All,
if
like,
you can get in there,
interwoven in the lobes and
yeah,
things.
and it's almost guaranteed, essentially guaranteed that you can't get all of it. You can debulk is what to get the
Right.
mass out of it, and if you're lucky, if a surgeon can get there. And so
Mhm.
until the past 2 years, I would say there have almost been 2 decades without a true new therapy that's been brought to market for glioblastoma. And there are a lot of reasons for this. I think one, it's just challenging to treat. There have
Mhm.
been a lot of attempts, but also when you have that history of challenging therapeutic development in terms of putting more money into the space, it also becomes hard. Because when people are thinking about where can we put our dollars that they think might be useful, I hate to say, they might put it towards something where there's a glimmer of activity and they want to make it better. But when there's been nothing, it's just really challenging.
Yeah.
And so for these communities, getting to know the GBM community recently has been the best part of my job. Really being able to talk to uh, patients, patient advocates, people that have these stories like yours, because it humanizes the really need in these populations. So maybe skipping forward a bit, there's a huge unmet need, especially when that is an aggressive moving tumor. For what we do, so again, these cell therapies, you can take cells out of the body, train them to target tumors, and put them back in. Um, in 2024, I'm getting my timing right. There were
Mhm.
two groundbreaking studies that have been built upon, the
Mhm.
shoulders of others, standing on the shoulders of others, where they actually, for GBM patients that have relapsed, so they had surgical resection and it comes
Mhm.
back inevitably, they get these things called Ommaya reservoirs surgically implanted that delivers chemo. So
Oh,
you get a port put
wow.
in, like
Wow.
surgically implanted into your brain around the tumor, which typically is for chemo. Um, until these two groups came out with the same month in 2024 showing instead of just putting a small molecule drug, you can now put cell therapies into that same port and you're overcoming the
The
delivery issue.
the brain barrier.
Yeah, yeah, which has been a big challenge. And those instructions that we're telling these cells to target the tumors, in solid tumors, you need to tell it to target two things, actually, instead of one, because the solid tumors are really hard to actually get something to look for, to target. And these two groups did that and came out with groundbreaking results. And I wish I wish I could hold it up on the screen here, where you're getting almost overnight. If you don't have to be a radiologist to see a
Mm.
tumor day 0 and then day 1 after, 2 after, the tumor is shrinking. So
Oh,
62% of
wow.
patients across both of these trials saw tumor shrinkage, which is
Incredible.
huge for the
Mhm.
field, but also for solid tumors.
Mhm.
But the problem here is that shrinkage was not durable.
It
And
didn't
so
stay the
and
same.
so it doesn't stay because that environment that's really hostile to your immune system and these therapies, eventually it turns it off pretty quickly. So,
Ugh, yeah.
but I say to
But
be
then does it
optimistic here,
regrow pretty
and
quickly?
then they regrow. So not all patients, but most of the patients, it regrows and they have to go into another therapy. Uh, that it is sad that happened, but for a high level view, that allows companies like ours to say something has started to work,
Mhm.
and we can use what we do at KiraGen to improve that because we know the problems at hand, and durability is what we focus on at KiraGen.
And so what are you doing at KiraGen?
Yeah, I wanted to take a pause and I was talking so
Yeah.
much. So
No.
now I like to I do have one visual. So if you remember anything from the podcast listeners and Rosa, we build the noise cancellation headphones for cell
Mhm.
therapies. So if I'm telling you that a tumor and its environment is loud and just has all this noise telling you to stop, um, a a T cell or an immune cell has receptors or microphones that are listening to all these off signals. We use gene editing technology to remove those some microphones that give the sort of metaphorical equivalent of noise cancellation headphones. So when those cells can now go into whatever it is, that hostile environment in the brain or other spaces, they can have that activity of tumor shrinkage, but do it longer. And just that longer durability, we hope, can really bring a large impact to these patients. Um, and that is sort of the biggest sort of pro, I guess, of what we're doing. But that same gene editing that we're doing also makes these therapies what's called off the shelf. So instead of having to take a patient's cells to make these therapies, which are really expensive and
Yeah.
take some time to make, we can actually use like a blood donation and make the same therapies cheaper and accessible for almost anybody. So our whole goal is to not only improve biology, but now to hopefully increase access, not just more people, but actually the cost, so that people don't have to uh, worry so much about the cost of these really sort of next generation therapeutics.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. I am just, like, over the moon to hear about, the potential for this because it is so needed and, like, there's just not any time to waste, and so
No.
I'm just so encouraged that, that's what you're dedicating your, time and your brain power to. And then for KiraGen right now, where are you at as far as in your company? Are you guys fundraising and are you in clinical trials or what stage are you in?
Yeah. So I think the answer to this question is always best in sort of two waves. I think a lot of people traditionally think of company stage as the fundraising stage, but I like to say the first question is time before the clinic is really the most important what you're doing. So we're about 2 years out from our first clinical trial, which for how young we are as a company is faster than I could have ever imagined, which is really exciting. And we are fundraising. So I think the we are very humbled to be starting in a space like glioblastoma. It does come with its inherent challenges when you're trying to raise money because that again that risk profile I was talking about um, is just much higher since these historical failures in the past. But we are so committed to not only these patients but the others we want to treat. So
And
we
somebody needs to do it. What's the
100%.
risk
Yeah.
of not doing it?
Well, actually, that's the question that we ask
Right.
ourselves. When people ask why we're doing what we're doing, my co-founder and I started this company because we actually didn't think anyone would do what we're
Yeah.
doing.
To make
And I
it.
think that is something that keeps, in a good way, keeps us up at night, so to speak, is that
Yeah.
no one else is sort of taking the approach we're doing. And we have so much confidence, I would say, just we have a lot of optimism for the impact. Just this first wave, it might not be the best, the perfect therapy. Nothing is perfect, but we know it's better than what's in development, and we think it can really impact a lot of people. So we 2 years out from a clinical trial, and we are. I think any company these days are almost always actively fundraising. So anyone listening, please reach out to me. And I think this is really important too. The fundraising narrative of biotech used to be you need $1 billion to do these drugs. And for some cases, it takes a lot of money. A big goal of ours is to change that.
Yeah.
So instead of instead of someone saying, I don't know what the impact of my check could have when it's going to take 10 years to get to market and you need $400 million or something wild that is hard to even comprehend. We actually can get to the clinic in 2 years from today with a fraction of that amount invested. So even angel investments, when someone wonders what the impact of their check is, we take that really seriously to kind of stretch the dollar, but in a great way. Yeah, so I think we're always excited to show not only can you start in a really challenging space, you can do it faster when you sort of know exactly what you're doing, and you can do that cheaply. That makes investment into a company like ours much more appealing than it used to be in the past.
And there are so many people starting businesses and looking for what is the problem that I want to solve. So you're so far ahead because you're like, oh, don't worry, we got the problem. We think we
Yeah.
got the solution. We just need to make it happen. Like,
Yes.
and I love
Yes. Yeah.
your mission mindedness in it.
Yeah, and I should say too, this is just the first. So glioblastoma is our first space that we're starting in.
Mhm.
Our second program is in pediatric gliomas, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
so the similar progress has been made on with children's brain tumors. It's not
Mhm.
glioblastoma is a problem, but there are some other different forms of brain cancer that are more common in kids,
Yeah.
and that is a whole nother, I don't want to say can of worms, of why it's challenging to make therapies for children. And we also have a lot of confidence that what we can do almost can, our learnings from this sort of brain based therapies can really go into these spaces really quick. So,
Really
uh,
establish the risk profiles and everything.
yeah, yeah. And so every
Right.
time we're sort of going these hard, if it works here, it can work in a lot of other areas.
Mhm.
And it feels like I wake up and go into a sci-fi kind of movie every day. But really getting to tell our story and hear from people that have stories like yours and others really gets us through the hard times, because it's not easy to do what we do every day, but it's an exciting path.
Well, and it is so needed. And yeah, like somebody's got to do it. Thank you so
Yes.
much for being the ones to do it. So, now at this point, this brings us to the $1 billion question that I ask every guest on the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. And you might want to use it for what you're working on. But at the same time, you just talked about being very efficient with funding. So I don't know. Maybe there are other solutions you see that you just don't have time to put your brain power and energy into because you got to focus, right? So, Erin, if you were given a grant for $1 billion to meet a need you see in healthcare, how would you like to see it used strategically to have the most sustainable impact?
Yeah, so I split this into three categories. I know it's not one thing, but
It's okay.
it's sort of how I think about it. Uh, the first is a bucket around investing into these types of challenging therapeutic spaces. So if we had the funding that we have been seeking, things could go to the clinic faster. But the traditional venture capital people that used to put money into these spaces are doing so much less than they used to. And so
Mm,
having a fund where you can identify other companies that are working on, it doesn't have to be glioblastoma, but
mhm,
something where there is merit there, not just high need, but real science
mm.
there that has a
Chance
lot
for
of traction.
success.
It's, yeah, early stage science needs more money, especially these days when the sort of public grant spaces from the government are in flux, maybe I should say.
Mhm,
So really strong, almost philanthropic arm that can take companies through what they call the startup valley of death, where maybe something started in academia, but it's not de-risked enough to get more money from like the traditional venture space.
mhm,
Um, the second is actually uh, on the therapeutic side. Our vision for these, what I'll call off the shelf therapies, is that you can have something best matched for a patient because you can make variations of these headphones. Just like I showed a black pair of headphones, you can make a
mhm,
gray, yellow, whatever it might be.
mhm,
We Our dream is for a patient to come into the hospital, have their next generation diagnostic that we do not develop. Diagnostic, you find out that you have X tumor. It looks like whatever it looks like. And that caregiver or provider goes to the freezer and pulls out a vial that is best matched for that patient, can give the therapy, and inevitably, because cancer is cancer, if it comes back or changes, because cancers change when they're treated, they look different. The,
Mhm.
the therapies and different kinds of therapies can follow patients along their journey. So
Wow.
it's so, if you're targeting more than one thing or you have available options, you could have, many different versions of this
Mhm.
that can literally keep treating the patient instead of worrying about one therapy that the cancer develops resistance to. And we talk about this library of these off-the-shelf therapies, but not just because of that ability to treat. It's actually also the location you can treat these patients.
Mm.
So today, these exciting next generation therapeutics are typically um, only able to be given at specialty care centers,
Right.
which the UPenns and the specialty hospitals that are at these universities,
Mhm.
and the majority, 70 more percent of patients with cancer get their care at a community based center.
Mhm.
And so we would love the ability to have these frozen therapies that can just be at all of these hospitals that
Mhm.
are accessible, that are so they're priced affordably. And if
Mhm.
you have enough of them, the majority of cancer patients can get their care where they get the rest of their care at, which is their
Right.
local facility. And so that sort of second bucket is investing in that type of therapeutic paradigm, whether it's just with our therapies or others, of finding even more ways. I worked at some local, I've come from a small town in Kentucky. I went to school at Center College and interned at a local cancer clinic there. It's really important to bring the therapies to where the patients are, not
Mhm.
have to get the patients to go to where the therapies are. Um, and the third bucket is then sort of something more and more near and dear to my heart are pediatric
Mhm.
indications. So maybe not just cancers, but specifically for our space, not just because they're children, and it's so hard to watch kids go through these really aggressive cancers when they just sometimes have no options left. Um, but for children, it's harder to make a therapy for children for, unfortunately, for a lot of different ways. From a regulatory space, it
Mhm.
just makes there are a lot of challenges that I don't think people consider.
Mhm.
Something that you're treating an adult with, say glioblastoma, a children's glioblastoma does not look the same.
Mhm.
And so there's so many historical challenges why someone does not say, I want to treat this childhood disease or cancer. And I think there needs to be more dedicated money going to people that come out of the gate saying, we don't just want to start with adults. We want to go and treat these children because they have a different disease, and we know that there are obstacles that need to be overcome. So really these three buckets of early stage science that needs to be funded. We need to get therapies to the patients that, however you do that, whether it's our off-the-shelf libraries or others, you need to get the therapies there, not have patients have to come to the therapy. And then third is really treating these childhood cancer indications where maybe it's even a small population where that business justification hasn't made sense traditionally. It's just really enabling those three spaces would be the apple of my eye to
Mhm.
to see happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, that we're doing everything we can to get there, right? So, did you say what particular regulatory changes might be helpful?
Yeah, so I think some of it, and it's hard. Regulatory changes are hard to make, but there are when you're thinking about going into a population first, uh, whatever the therapy is, typically the FDA wants you to treat an adult.
Yeah.
The risk profile is just
Mhm.
is different when you're thinking about developing therapies. Uh, that becomes challenging if the disease in a child looks different. So if you're
Because
targeting something,
you can't
it
do it
might
in
not
the
be
adult.
there.
Because
doesn't
it
do any.
isn't present
Yeah,
in
it's
the.
not there, and so, or if it works in an adult, does not mean it's going to work in a
So
child.
it's not
So
actually
that becomes
present.
hard.
Yeah.
Exactly, and some of this for children, I hate that this is the case, but from a business perspective, they're they're smaller populations. So there are some of these cancers where the business case in the past has not made sense, and so there's just all these obstacles you have to overcome, um, that have made it really hard for companies in the past to do sort of make the case we're making today. And one of the reasons I went back to business school, so I was a scientist for about 10 years before I went back to
Mhm.
business school, was to be able to say that, you know, you can do this. Just
Uh-huh.
because people haven't done this or thought about it before does not mean it's not possible. That's an important thing for everybody, that you might see other people do things. That does not mean there's not another path
Yeah.
to take, and to be able to come out and say, listen, I know that this is the model that people have done. Y- You don't have to do that. It's the more trodden path. But I want to come out and say, no, these therapies can be made cheaper. You can get to the clinic faster, and we can treat those populations today. You just have to be given the chance, and have them. And I have a lot of support from, from not just the community, but now the schools and spaces I've been in and fellowships, that I can come out and say that. And I hope
Mhm.
that by being on these podcasts, and why I like to tell my story is I got the motivation and conviction to say what I'm saying now by
Yeah.
listening to others
Mhm.
that share their story, but maybe being a little different than what people have done in the past.
Exactly. How are things gonna get better if we work really hard to stay the same?
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So, this has been so exciting and inspiring to learn from you, Erin, about the great work that you are doing in the world. And thank you for pushing forward with your optimism despite all the challenges. And I really love that you went back to business school because you're like, I'm going to learn how to talk money to these people because the talking science to the business people is not cutting it.
100%. And thank you
That
for having me. Thank
seems
you
to
so
be
much
the.
for having me and being able to share our story with others.
Yeah, definitely. So, if anyone is listening and they want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn the best way?
LinkedIn for sure. And then even on our website, so www.KiraGenBio, KiraGenBio.com. There's a contact form that also sends me an email. So
Mhm,
any way is possible. We also have a Twitter
mhm,
or X
mhm,
account.
mhm.
So in any way, I really do my best to talk to anybody that might be interested in learning more. So feel free to reach out. Would love to hear from you.
Excellent. And for those of you listening, if you enjoyed this episode of the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube. And feel free to follow me at Nurse Rosa Speaks on all of the social media platforms. And I will see you in the next episode.